and welcome to the Rabe Creations podcast. My name's Nicole, and I'm coming to you from Calgary, Alberta, here in Canada, where I live with my husband Barry, and my beautiful, wonderful, rescued Rottweiler named Grace. So if you are a returning viewer, welcome, and thank you for coming back. If you are a new viewer, this video will be a little bit different episode-wise than my normal episode, because I have put together a list of tips and suggestions in regards to doing markets. I spent last weekend, the Mother's Day weekend, vending at a fiber festival here in Calgary, and it was quite successful. And I had asked my viewership if they would be interested in seeing and hearing some suggestions and some advice about potentially new people to markets, if you're considering doing your first ever market, very exciting, or even the old hands out there at markets. It's never a bad thing to learn from each other. That's one of the amazing things about our community, is the fact that we offer up our help and our assistance and our knowledge, and we share that with each other, and we support each other and raise each other up, and that is fantastic. Already. So, as I said, this episode is going to be a little bit different than the normal Rabe Creations episode, but I hope you enjoy this. If you do, remember, give it a thumbs up. Comment below if you have any questions or any comments, any things that you do at market that work out really successfully for you. Let's start sharing that information. Let's encourage each other, and as I said, lift each other up, and hopefully, make our community even stronger. So I have extensive notes that I will be referring to, so please excuse me if I look down. So first off, I know I said that I would be doing some vlog style videos for my market. I do have a little bit of a video that I will add into the end of this podcast. I do apologize ahead of time for the video quality. I have never used my DSLR, and that's what I record on. I've never used it to do handheld video recording, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on which way you look at it, I vended this market on my own, so I did not have a booth buddy with which to share the responsibility of things. So I was only able to do a quick little snippet of video, and unfortunately, the quality is not the best. It's a little out of focus, but I will include that at the end. And I will include some still photographs, which obviously came out much better, of my market setup, and potentially of previous market setups as well, so that you can see the difference. This past market was the first time I was able to do more of a booth and less of just a table. Both are viable, both are a lot of fun. There are some differences to both, though. I prefer actually to do the booth setup. It makes you sort of be able to create your own little space as opposed to just having a table. So in the future, if I have the option of doing a booth or a table, I'm going to do booth all the way. But all right, let's get into it. So I've entitled this, "So You Want to Do a Craft Market?" One of the first things that people sort of have a misconception about with these craft markets is that, they're going to make a ton of money. I am sure that there are people out there who have been doing this a long time, have got it all worked out, and do make a significant amount of money. I am not one of those people. I've been doing craft markets for almost 3 years now. And for me, if I make back the entry fee of the market, then everything else is gravy. So that's the way I look at it. As long as I break even on the table, I consider it a success. If I can make profit over top of that, then it's a rousing success. So it's not something that I make a ton of money at initially. But there are ways at the market of being able to put your brand out there, get yourself out there. If you've got an Etsy shop, you can be promoting that Etsy shop, taking special orders, and we'll get into all of that. So the reach of the market goes well beyond the actual just day of the market if you do it correctly. My other life, my full-time job is in sales. I work in a bookstore. I worked in the fashion industry for 15 years before the bookstore, and I've been at the bookstore for almost 7 now. So I have an extensive background in retail sales, in visual merchandising, in brand establishment. So I'm able to bring some of that to the table that potentially not everybody has. And I am more than willing to share some of this information with you. Again, if you have questions, please, by all means, write down your questions, ask them, send me private messages. I'd love to help you out. Alrighty, so I guess the first thing we need to talk about is what to do before the market, how to decide what market to get involved with. So I would say that if possible, if there's a market you're interested in, visit the market as a customer before you commit to being a vendor. I know this isn't always possible if you're looking to do something this year and you've never done it before, but perhaps there's a market out there that you went to as a customer last year that you really identified with. Different markets have different clientele, have different feels to them, and have different setups. Do you want to be in a market that is all just handmade goods? Or do you want to be in a market that has direct sales in it as well? So are you okay with a market that's got, say, a Tupperware person next to you? Because the person who comes to market, the market goer, the customer, may be very different. So if it's a market that consists mainly of direct sales and you're one of a handful of handmade, bespoke individuals, it could be a great thing, or it could really hurt you if people are just there for that mass market product that they know, those brand names that they know. Alternately, sometimes being that one or two of the really truly handmade makers at a market can work in your favor. It really just depends on the market. I do suggest you research your market before you commit. If it's not possible to go to the market as a customer before committing as a vendor, does the market have a web page? Does the organizer of the market have some pictures of previous years that they've done the market that you can take a look at and get a feel for the different booths or the different tables that were set up? This can also help you to sort of decide whether it's a market that's going to fit your brand and your aesthetic. Now, you may say, Nicole, I don't have a brand, I don't have an aesthetic, but you do. You may not know it, but you do, and it's important that you identify that. Now, if I seem a little preachy here, I apologize. This is something I'm very passionate about. I love marketing. I love visual merchandising. It's establishing my brand is something that I've put a lot of work into, and I continue to work at it every single day. And if you want to be a successful seller, that it is a level of commitment that not everybody is willing to do. So, does the market have a theme? If it's a Christmas market, you need to identify that. If it's a fall fair, you need to identify that. Does it happen near a holiday? Is it happening on Mother's Day? Is it a maker's market, or is it a like the market I was just at was a fiber festival? So most of the people coming to it were people who were crafters themselves. So it was a different sort of a market. It wasn't as much finished goods, although that's not quite true in my case, but we'll get into that. It was more about, there was lots of hand-dyed yarns. There was lots of, people who make crochet hooks and knitting needles and project bags and progress keepers and that sort of thing. So it was the tools that crafters and makers need for their trade. That's what was there. So you want to play up the theme in your product that you bring, as well as in the decor that you do. And yes, it is important that you stage your table or stage your booth. It's important that you just don't lay a whole bunch of stuff out on a table and think it's going to sell. That makes it look like a flea market as opposed to a handcrafted, bespoke, one of a kind booth that you're going to pay good money to buy that product. If you set up to look like a flea market, you're going to get flea market customers who only want to pay you flea market prices. You can't afford that. You and I both know how expensive, not just in materials, but in time, how labor intensive what we do is. So we need to make sure that we're presenting it as such. You then need to figure out what your table fee or your booth fee is going to be. Figure out how much product you need to sell to make that a reality, to at least make back that entrance fee, and decide whether that's a risk you're willing to take. There's a market happening here in Calgary that I would absolutely love to get involved with. And it's actually now on my plans for 2020. So for next year, next September, not this September, but the following one, I want to get involved in it. But it's a 4-day show and the entry fee is over $800. So I need to be a little bit more established. I need to have more of a draw already, and I need to build up merchandise. So, right now, the most expensive markets I do are about $150, and that's usually a 2-day market. So an $800 market for 4 days is incredibly expensive, but I'm hoping that I'll have a big enough brand at that point to be able to make it work. The foot traffic at that market is astounding. So it's something that I am definitely seriously looking into for next year. Excuse me while I turn my page. All right, on to your product. All right. So your product. So I've been working markets for a number of years now. Like I said, this is sort of my 3rd year of doing, a half dozen markets a year. I'm not an expert. I can only share with you my experience and what's worked for me within my marketplace. So your experiences may be different. And that's why I'm really into getting a conversation going, making this a bit of an ongoing conversation between those of us who do markets and hopefully helping each other out. If there's anybody else out there who's in my Southern Alberta marketplace who wants some advice, I'd love to sit down and chat. I'd love to pick the brain of other people who do markets and what's worked well for them. Knowing your market area is really important in everything you do for a market. So product. When I talk product, a lot of times I'm talking about branding. Branding, of course, is the identification of your product, your booth as being a cohesive look, a cohesive story. There's lots and lots of information out there. On YouTube, through the internets on branding, a lot of free information out there. I suggest if you are just starting to sort of dabble into selling product, take a look at some of those videos. They explain it in detail. I could do a whole video just on branding. And maybe I will one day, who knows, depends on how you all react to this video. So the first thing you're going to need to do, well, not the first thing, but one of the things you're going to need to do once you've decided that you're going to do a market, you've committed, you've put your entry fee in, you've got your table, you're in, you're committed to do the market. Hopefully you've given yourself some time and it's not a market that you're going to, commit to and it's in a week. I've done that before. I don't suggest it. It's way too stressful. I like to have a month or two before the market happens to get all of my product together, to get everything ready to go. That way it's less stressful. And yeah, you don't want to leave a week before your market when you finally committed to it, or even scheduling markets that close together unless you've got a really established amount of product. Don't do it. Speaking from experience, don't do it. If you value sleep and sanity, don't do it. Alrighty, so decide what you want to bring. So, what's going to be the story of your booth or of your table? Some of the information that I'm going to share right now, you may sit there and go, Nicole, you're crazy. What are you talking about? This, as I said, is what works for me. In my many years of experience in marketing and in visual merchandising and in sales, this is the information I've pulled from that and brought to my own brand. So just bear with me. Too much variety can lead to a disorganized and amateur looking setup. Yes, you heard that correctly. So you don't want to have too much variety in what you've brought. You don't want to limit it, but not too much either. It's about finding that sweet spot. Chances are it will not be perfect for your first show. It may not even be perfect for your first 5 shows. Eventually, you will find your sweet spot. You will find what you want to sell and what speaks, what says you. And that's important. But don't try and bring the world. Really focus on what you want your branded story to be. That can change from show to show, or you may really be trying to establish, yourself as the hat and cowl maker, that the go-to hat and cowl maker. If that's what you want to be, then focus on that. Don't also bring 500 other things. Focus on hats and cowls if that's what you want to be identified for. And I know you're going to say, but Nicole, I do all kinds of things. And I know, and there's ways to show that to your market, but not in the actual product that you bring. Decide what you're going to bring. What's the story that you want to tell? So avoid the temptation to make that awesome hat in every color of the rainbow because, well, a customer might want pink or purple or orange or green or blue, or you're going to end up with a display that looks, again, very visually cluttered. It's going to look like, you want things to look cohesive. Decide on your color palette. Now, you may go into stores and you may research sort of what the new color palettes are. Do some research online. Find out what the popular color palettes are. It's really easy for us, ladies and gentlemen. There may be gentlemen out there, not limiting my viewership, but it's really easy. Go look at the new yarns coming in for the season. Those will be indicative as to what good colors are out there. Pick a color palette so that visually your display plays together nicely. My personal preference when I do a hat or cowl setup or that sort of thing is I'll pick a color palette and I may do 12 different hats. Each hat is a different pattern, but it's all within that same color palette. So that the variety is in the pattern, not necessarily in the color. Now, I'm not saying choose one color and do everything one color. That's going to look just as boring, unless you're to do something really monochromatic, like say black and white, which would look really fantastic. But choose a palette of color. So, when you look at Karen Pantone's, this is definitely a color palette. This is a pretty monochrome color palette, but this is what I'm talking about. So if you were going to go with blues and grays as your color palette, then your table would be covered in all different shades of blue and gray, and that's going to speak volumes about your brand. It really will have a cohesive look. Knowing what the popular colors are going to be, that's a bit of a crapshoot. The fashion industry plays that game all the time. Make it something that you're comfortable with. Not necessarily is every customer going to be exactly like you, but it needs to work with your aesthetic. So you're trying to build a look with your table. Think about how stores, how boutiques set up their collections. There's a planned cohesion to what they're doing. When you walk past a store and it really catches your eye, start looking at that strategically. What about the setup is catching your eye? If you look at a table, there may be a rainbow table, but that is their intent. And you'll notice that it is done as a rainbow. So it follows a specific order in its color content. It's done intentionally. It's not just a mass of product on a table. Now, that does happen in stores, and it's usually not the stores that are getting a higher price point. So if you want to be able to charge what your product is worth, both in materials and time, you need to follow some of these guidelines. If you want a professional and attention-grabbing setup, limit your color palette. You can always take orders for other colors. So if you have somebody who says, oh, I love this style, but don't you have anything in neon green? You can say, well, I don't have anything here in neon green, but let me put your name down in this special orders book. And if you pay me half up front, I can have that order ready for you next week. See where I went with that? So you can take those orders for colors outside of your palette. There's nothing saying you can't have a box down underneath your table that has other colors in it. So when that customer says, oh, well, I love this style, but do you have something in a neon green? You may have something in a neon green, but it's not going to be part of your display. It's something that you can pull out and show to someone and then put away if they decide not to purchase it. But don't throw it on there with the rest of your colors. It's going to start looking too busy. Avoid the temptation of bringing too much variety. I know that sounds really counterintuitive, but it's better to be seen as a master of a select number of items than having a little bit of everything. That, again, it's about cohesion and about telling a story. For example, at my last show, I carried 4 main product lines. I carried bags. Now, there was variety within the bags. There was 3 different sizes of project bags. There was a crocheted market bag, but it was bags, so it told a story. There were progress keepers, which were all arranged together in one area. It told a story. There was some amigurumi, which again was all grouped together, and it told a story. And then there was a display of some child-size mandala vests. That was it. Those were the 4 types of things that I brought for sale. I did have some other things in my booth. I had some sock blockers, and I put some crocheted socks on there to show that, first of all, yay crochet, that we can do things like socks and crochet, and to show what the use of the item was. I had some of my crochet blankets there, but they were mainly there as props, not necessarily as selling items. Now, if somebody had said, hey, I love that blanket, would I have sold it? Hells yes, I would have. But it wasn't the intent to focus on the blankets as a selling piece. They were just folded and stacked nicely, like you see in the photographs of the blankets, how they stack and they just look beautiful. So it was about getting that aesthetic happening as opposed to selling those pieces. So I had my 4 main product lines. Do I do hats and scarves? Yes. Do I do blankets? Yes. Do I do baby clothes and baby booties? Yeah. I do so many other things outside of those 4 product lines, but that's what I chose for this market. That's the story I wanted to tell. I personally avoid making multiples or exact duplicates of anything. So I see a lot of people will come to market and they'll have a whole tub of the same owl amigurumi in different colors, a whole tub of it. That creates no sense of urgency to your customer. If they look at your table and they see an amazing assortment of amigurumi and each one is different, they're more likely to buy with immediately. They're less likely to leave your booth and look at everything else and do the old, I'll come back. 90% of the time, I'll come back doesn't happen. You need to get them in the moment, and you need to do that by creating a sense of urgency. So you may have 10 owls. Put 1, maybe 2 out. The rest are down in your excess stock. Don't put them all out. You don't create a sense of urgency. It's also harder to get top dollar for your product if the customer sees that you have 20 of them. If there's one of the owl amigurumi on your table and you have a $30 price point on it, which I did at the last sale and I sold it, the person who really wants that is going to grab it because it's the only one there. There's not a whole bunch to say, well, can you do better on the price? I don't get any kind of dickering with my prices when I present them as bespoke, unique, one-of-a-kind items. Once that person purchases that owl and walks away, can I pull out another one? Yep. So I can have some back stock, but I'm not going to put them all out. Now I've heard other people who have great success with bringing, a bazillion of those little octopus amigurumis and having them on the table. But to me, that's asking for mass product pricing. It's going to be a lower price point than if you have one or two. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but there is a psychology that goes behind visual merchandising and setting things up and behind sales and behind buying. I don't mean to scare anybody off with all this information, but I think it's important. It's important that you know this so that you're feeling successful and you may have some answers as to why you potentially didn't do as well as you thought you would at another craft fair. So, and as I said at the beginning, these are just my opinions. I'm not an expert. This is what works for me, and that's why I thought I would share it with you. So let me see here. The same thing, as I said, with the amigurumi, where it's sort of one-ofs. The same with your fashion pieces. So the children's mandala vests that I brought to the last market that I did 2 of each size. So I do a small, a medium, and a large. I did 2 of each size, but they were not the same. Each one was a very unique color. They were all fairly bright because they were meant for children and it's spring. So I made a point of bringing brighter colors. All of the colors worked together, but they were all different colors. So very much primary colors, but each vest was very, very unique. I want to create that bespoke feel. I want people to feel like if they buy that mandala vest for their child, that 6 other kids on the block are not going to have that exact same sweater. It's been my experience that the people who come to these events who are willing to pay good money, so not the people who are looking for flea market pricing, but the people who are willing to pay one-of-a-kind bespoke boutique pricing, want something unique. They don't want the same shirt or hat or cowl as their neighbor. They may really like what their neighbor's got, but they want theirs to be a little bit different. So play up on that. Make sure that the groups go together so that all of my mandala vests looked like they were going to the same party. They were the same color. They were the same style, or the same color palette and the same style, but each was unique. And that really does create that sense of I'm getting something special. And people are willing to pay more for a special, unique piece. One of the things that I have done in markets and that I suggest you do is if you have a portfolio of pictures of product that you've made, I always take a picture of everything that I make to sell. Everything that I've ever sold, there is a picture of in my portfolio. I can take my iPad and set up a slideshow that can play continuously, have it on the corner of my table, and it can show other product that I also create. So customers can say, hey, I just saw something go by on your iPad and I really like that. And again, I can take custom orders, or I can direct them to my webpage, or I can direct them to my Etsy store, or there's ways to get all of your product on the table, even if it's not physically on the table. Taking orders is important, but always get a deposit. Never takes orders and then try and contact the person afterwards. By making people leave a deposit, a non-refundable deposit, they are more likely to actually, sorry, the bird just flew by. They are more likely to actually come pick up the product or to go through with the rest of the purchase than if they haven't paid anything. up front. So make sure you get a deposit on anything you're doing as a special order. It's really important. At least a deposit that will cover the cost of the materials. You can always sell that piece to someone else and recoup the double or triple cost of materials, but at least in the initial pre-order, make sure you've covered your cost of materials so that you're not out of pocket if somebody decides not to go through with the purchase. All right, so next up is pricing, the question of the day, the question everybody asks. All right, the question that everybody asks, how do you price your product? How do you know what to charge? So my personal rule of thumb is to charge 2.5 to 3 times the cost of materials. Always the full price of the cost of materials. So just because you used a coupon and got 50% off that skein of yarn, good on ya. But that's not the cost of the yarn. The cost of the yarn is the actual retail price of the yarn. So if the skein of yarn is a $6 price of yarn and it's only going to take you one skein or a partial skein to make the product, I would charge 2.5 to 3 times the cost of that skein as the final cost of the product. I always deal in full skeins, never in scraps. Now, sometimes if I'm doing, say, an amigurumi, and it's got, 3 different colors in it, but all in all, I know that it would be about 2 skeins of yarn. I'll go with that. Or if it's, got one main color and then 3 other colors, but I'm only using bits of those other colors, I'll call it 2 skeins and go with that as my base price. And then again, the 2.5 to 3 times that base price. I never look at it as it was just scraps, so it doesn't matter. It does matter. And every project, every new item is a new item. It's not, even if you can get 2 cowls out of, 1 skein of yarn, each cowl needs to pay for a single skein of yarn. This is how you make a profit, and you need to make a profit. If you're going to be selling at these markets, it's important that you make a profit for a few reasons that I'll get into. So with my price on amigurumi, it gets a little bit different than the 2.5 to 3 skeins. Sometimes it depends on the size of the finished amigurumi. So people I found in my market are willing to pay more for bigger amigurumi than smaller amigurumi. Even if the small one is incredibly detailed, they see size as being worth more. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're doing small little amigurumi that are incredibly detailed and taking you a lot of time, you may not get the return on investment that you need. I find my market will allow me to charge anywhere from $5 for like little tiny, hold in your hand, very simple pieces, all the way up to $65 is what the most expensive amigurumi I've ever sold at market. So there is the ability to get those bigger price tags from the amigurumi as long as the product is wow. In order for me to charge the $45 to $65 price point for my amigurumis, those are the ones that are stunning. The ones that, and I try and bring 1 or 2 to every show because they're the attention catchers. They're the ones that I sit right at the very top of my display, and they're the ones that draw the people in. They may not purchase those ones. The price tag may not be for them. They may not have that amount of money to spend on an amigurumi, but then they may go to some of the smaller ones, but it grabs their attention. And eventually the bigger ones do sell. You will find the person who just has to have it. So yeah, it does happen. Price everything before the show and put a price tag on everything. You can go to Michael's here in Canada, probably in the States. Hobby Lobby has it as well. I don't know. I don't have a Hobby Lobby. But you can get, price tags and you can do that. There's various things on the internet where you can download templates if you want to do it that way. Personally, I have a ton of paper crafting supplies because, yes, I used to spend a lot of time doing scrapbooking. So I have tons of paper craft supplies. So I hand make all of my tags. Is it labor intensive? Absolutely. But all of those things add to the perceived value of your goods. So the more personal touches, the more bespoke, the more handmade you make something look, the more people are willing to pay for it. So yes, making my price tags takes time. But I have found that by doing that, customers are more likely to spend more money on my product than if I just use a piece of cardstock. So something to keep in mind. The more handcrafted you make something look, the more money people are willing to pay for it. Now, with my paper crafting supplies, I've already got it. I'm not investing any more money. Scrapbooking is not something I do a lot of anymore, and boy, do I have supplies. So I'm not investing a lot of money into those supplies right now to be able to do that. So again, you have to weigh it. You have to make sure that you're not investing so much that you're not making any profit. But just keep that in mind. The more handmade, the more bespoke you make your everything you do about your product, the more money people are willing to pay. Even if you're using signs, I suggest you price your items. In the retail world in general, and these shows are no different, people don't always read signs, or you'll watch them read the sign, and then they'll pick up the product and say to you, so how much is this? Just put the prices on it. For example, I don't have a flat price on my amigurumis or on my hats or anything. Everything tends to be different prices based on how much product went into it, the cost of the yarn that was used, and that sort of thing. And that's okay. That's okay as long as everything is priced. So you're at the market, you've got your product laid out, you've got your prices, you've preset your prices, and you have, a handful of people come by, and in the first hour, you've had a whole bunch of people picking things up and saying, oh, this is lovely, and then they look at the price and go, ooh, but that's too expensive. Do not change your prices. First off, a lot of markets really, really frown on that. Do not change your prices. Stick with the price that you picked and use it as a learning experience. And I know it's really hard to do because you just want to make sales. You want to get the price of your table back. You need to, in your heart, know what your product is worth. You need to believe that your product is worth that. If you start lowering your prices, if you start scratching things out and writing other prices on things, you're devaluing what you're doing. When you set your prices, you decided what it was worth, and you need to stick to that. It might be that the market you're at was not the right market for your price point. So be it. That's a learning experience. You're not going to go back to that market. You may afterwards sit down and go, well, you know what? Maybe I was a little too ambitious with this. Maybe instead of 3 times the price, next market I'm going to try 2.5 times the price of the yarn and see what happens there. You will eventually find your sweet spot. But during the market itself, do not change your prices. Now, the opposite may happen as well. All of a sudden, you may get, you brought 10 hats, or well, I hope you brought more than 10 hats. You brought 50 hats and 50 cowls. And you sell through, miracle of miracles, all 50 of the hats and cowls. Chances are your pricing was way too low. So next market, you're going to raise your prices. Not by a lot, but by a little bit. You want to find the sweet spot. When it comes to pricing the goods, Sometimes you do have to pay a little bit of attention to what others around you have priced at. So even though you've gone into the market and you set your price on that hat at $25, you're going to leave that price at $25. You have to believe in that price because that's what you believe it's worth. But you take some time during the market to look at what other people are doing, and we all do it. It's not frowned upon. And looking at other people's prices, and you've noticed that every single other hat in the market is $20 or below. You may have outpriced yourself. That doesn't mean you're going to rush back to your table and change your prices, but it means that if you do that market again, you're going to come in and you're going to lower your price by $1 or $2 per hat. It's a learning experience, and you will find your sweet spot. A lot of it is you. You need to believe in the price that you've made your product. If you believe it's worth that much, you're going to be able to sell it for that much. If you think, well, I would never buy a hat for that much, you're never going to sell it either. So you have to believe in your pricing. You have to believe that that hat or that cowl or that amigurumi or that blanket, you have to believe, you truly need to believe that it's worth that in order to sell it at that. People can tell if you don't believe it. If you believe it, they'll believe it too. And I know you don't believe me right now, but it's true. I swear to you, it's true. Let me see here. Do not underprice. That's really important. So going into a market and saying, well, the hat actually only cost me $5 because I got a good deal on the yarn, so I'm going to charge $6 for the hat. No, don't do that. You're devaluing not just yourself and your product and your time, but you're not helping the industry. And I know that sounds silly, but we're all in this together. And not everyone is trying to make a living off of what they're making. Not everyone is trying to, make a huge profit. And there is going to be some price differences within the market. But when you completely undercut everybody else at the market, you may make some great sales and you may feel really good about what you've done for sales wise. But I challenge that if you actually look at your profit margin, you've pretty well given your product away. And I did have a situation where there was somebody at a market who literally was giving her product away. She was charging like $5 for a hat that I know took at least a skein of $5 yarn. So she was literally not making any profit. And when another vendor actually approached her at her price and asked, how can you possibly do that? She flat out said, well, I don't want to make any money on this. I just want to get rid of it. And unfortunately, what that does in the public's eyes, it devalues what we do. They see that lowest price point as potentially all that what we do is worth. And we know that's not true. Please don't underprice your product. It doesn't just, make it so that you've literally just given your product away, but it hurts every single other person at the market. And there are people who are trying to make a living at this. And honestly, if you want to just give it away, go donate it to charity. Yeah, it's something I feel very passionate about. You may disagree. By all means. I mean, I understand a competitive marketplace, and I'm not talking about not having a competitive marketplace, but when you're giving your product away, when you're not charging even the cost of your goods or just the cost of your materials, you're not helping yourself and you're not helping this industry. No one who works in this industry or even dabbles in it, nobody who's even a hobbyist thinks that you can make a hat and sell it for the same price as you could go to Walmart and buy a wool hat. It doesn't happen. We know that. And we need to educate the public. What you need to be able to do is explain to the public why your hat is worth twice as much as they're going to pay at Walmart. That's the trick, is being able to believe in your product and have the customer believe in your product. Giving it away is not, it doesn't, it's doing a disservice to all of us. I can't tell you exactly how to price your product because it's really going to depend on your personal market. Every market is going to have a different minimum price and a different maximum price, and it's really up to you to figure that piece out. And sometimes, as I said, it takes a couple of shows to find that sweet spot. All right, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is setups. So how to set up your booth for the most impact. All right, so booth setup or table setup is really, really important. As I said, you can just put all your stuff onto a table and think it's going to sell and it's not. Or it will at flea market prices. If you want to get that good price for your goods, you need to set it up so that it appeals. And that includes things like having props. Now, I spend a lot of time all year round with an eye for props and looking at things and thinking, ooh, I would love to have that basket in my house to hold my yarn, but I'm also going to use it at market for this purpose. So most of the props that I bring to market are things that I use in the house all the time. And it's just stuff that I bring to market with me to make my booth look more appealing, to make it look like a professional setup. Now, I am blessed to have a husband who is a woodworker. So some of my display pieces, you'll see those in the pictures that I will add to the end of this video, were made by him. So you will see that there is a chicken wire frame display that I put my progress keepers on. I can also use that at Christmas time to hang ornaments on. So everything has multiple purposes. That's really important. But even things like having vintage suitcases that you could display things in, always being on the lookout for, pieces that you can use as props for your setup. If you're just putting together your first setup, I do suggest, and even if not, sometimes if I'm going to a new venue and it's a different type of a setup, I suggest you do a mock setup in your living room or out in the yard if it's a nice day. So, if you've got a table of a certain size, if it's your table, set it up. Put it together. Once you've got it together and you really like how it looks, take a picture so that when you get to market, you're able to just look at that picture and rebuild it, not having to think. Just setting it up. So predetermining how you want things to look. I really suggest that you keep an eye out for businesses that are going out of business. They often do fixture sell-offs. That's where I have picked up mannequins, bust forms, that sort of thing from. So definitely be on the lookout for that sort of thing, or checking your local Kijiji listings. You may find stuff on there as well. So ultimately what you're trying to do is create visual interest in your setup. So you have to, again, go back to the very beginning where I said, what story are you trying to tell? Think about the boutique stores and how they arrange things and how there's different levels and different visual spots that your eye stops. So most tables in a visual setup, if your eye can just travel all the way across the table and not stop at anything, it's not a great setup. You want somebody to be sort of looking and stop and looking and stop and looking and stop. And they do that by seeing different vignettes, different groupings of product. Go online, take a look at different people's market setups. What about that market setup is catching your eye? Because remember, we talked about it's not just about massing out all your product and crossing your fingers that somebody buys it. There is strategy involved in how to place things, in keeping like with like. So, having all of your hats together in one area, having all of your amigurumi together in another area, keeping things color coordinated. So if you've got a rainbow, if rainbow is your color palette, then setting it up in the proper rainbow order. So Roy G. Biv, setting it up so that it's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. So making sure that it follows that color arrangement. Making sure that visually things go together. It's not just, a whole bunch of hats in 500 different colors in a pile, because then you're going to look like a flea market. And that's okay if you want to get flea market prices, but if you want to get better pricing for your goods, you need to present it as if it's worth more than flea market. So you want to create different heights with things. Now, I have been doing this long enough now that I have different props I can use. I have wooden boxes, I have crates, and you can pick these things up. I mean, Michael's has wooden crates, I believe, here in Canada. They're like $17 full price. Go in there with your 45% off coupon, and you're going to get it for a pretty good deal. You can leave it plain wood, you can paint it out, you can do what you need to do to make it your aesthetic, but, and you don't have to have a ton of things to start with. Just one or two things to give some interest to your table. Heck, if it's your first show, that Rubbermaid bin that you brought your product to the market in, flip it upside down on your table, cover everything with a tablecloth. Now you've got two different levels on your table. So there's ways to create visual interest in your table that's not going to cost you a ton of money, but it's really important that you do. You want to have a table that's not just a flat table with a whole bunch of stuff laid on it. You're not gonna get top dollar for that display. You want the display to look dynamic. Do not overfill your table. So again, you've brought 50 hats to market. Don't put 50 hats on your table. Put 20 hats on your table. Then you're able to take, and as a hat sells, you can put a new hat out. Or if after a couple of hours nothing is selling, start switching out what you've got. Change things around. Move it around. Like take the nobody is buying the white color that you brought, so get rid of that white color and bring out more of the gray, because that's what people are buying. So you can rotate your stock on your table, but don't put 50 hats on a table. You're not creating a sense of urgency when you have 50 hats on a table. You want customers to believe that they are getting unique handcrafted items. And they are, whether it's 50 of them or 20 of them. But if they see 50 hats on a table, they don't see it as being unique and bespoke anymore. They see it as mass produced. So if you want to get the dollar that a bespoke item is going to allow you to ask for, you need to present it as such. You'll also find that once you start charging what your product is worth and presenting it in this way, you only have to sell half as much. You only have to transport half as much. That becomes really important. So don't negate that. It's not necessarily about the amount that you've sold as opposed to the amount of money that you've sold it for. So you need to keep that in mind. Don't overfill your table. Less is more. Let me see. Make sure you have business cards. You can print those out yourself. You can get them professionally printed for very inexpensively. I had 2 boxes of business cards printed by Vistaprint 3 years ago, and I still have some left. So it's not like it's something that you have to print every single time. Make sure it's a look to the business card that, again, fits your aesthetic. If you have the ability, or if you know someone who has the ability to help you design a logo, use your logo everywhere. Brand everything. You want people to associate that logo with your product. Make sure that the day of the show, you bring lots of change. Generally, I bring at least $300 in fives, plus rolls of loonies and toonies. Now, my American viewers and my UK viewers may not know what loonies and toonies are. We have coin for $1 and $2 denominations. A loonie is a $1 coin and a toonie is a $2 coin. So I make sure that I have lots of coin, lots of change to be able to give to people. There is a question about, Square. Should I invest in a Square reader? Should I take credit and debit? I've been doing markets for 3 years now, and I will for my next market be investing in a Square reader, but I haven't had to until now. I would suggest for your first couple of markets, just do cash. And you're going to lose some sales. Absolutely, you are. But again, when it comes to initial investment, it costs us as Canadians. I think the lady I was talking to at the last market I was at, my next door neighbor, for all of her hardware for her Square setup, it was about $80. So that's $80 of an investment, and then you get charged a service fee on every transaction you do. So you have to make, in addition to your table fee, you would have to make at least $80 in sales from that market if this is your first market to even pay for the reader, let alone the transaction fees. So you know what? Try a couple of markets first. See if this is something you even enjoy doing before you invest a whole lot up front. I've done quite well in markets just saying that I take cash only. I don't do markets unless they have an ATM on site. So I don't do markets unless they have a cash machine on site that people can withdraw cash from. Going forward, once I get my Square reader, that may change. But as to now, I just made sure that the market venue had an ATM on site or I wouldn't commit. Ultimately, when it comes to sales, you're not selling your product. Now, you may be saying, Nicole, you've completely lost me. What the heck are you talking about? When it comes to sales, what you're selling is yourself. As I said earlier, when it comes to pricing and stuff, you need to believe in your pricing. You need to own your brand. The same is true of the entire experience. You are selling yourself in the marketplace. So you need to be prepared to talk to people. You are not going to make sales if you're sitting behind your table on your cell phone. You're not going to make sales if you're sitting behind your table in your booth talking to your booth buddy. And booth buddies are a great thing to bring, by the way. If you ever need to go to the bathroom, it's nice to be able to step away and know that sales can continue. But yeah, you need to be ready to engage your customer. You need to talk to them. You need to be passionate about what you're doing. You need to be ready to tell people why they want to buy your product. What are the features? What are the advantages? What are the benefits of what you're selling? Know and be able to speak to what it's made of. Know and be able to speak to care instructions. So how do they wash it? Can they wash it? Does it need to be hand washed? Can it go in the washer and dryer? Talk about techniques. When I talk to people about the stuffed toys that I carry, I don't call them stuffed toys. I tell them that, these are the amigurumi style toys. Use the technical terms. People love it. You come across as an expert because you know what? You are an expert. Use the jargon, use the terms. Make people realize that this is a specialty that you do and that not everyone can do it. Use the names of stitches. If somebody is looking at a hat that you've used a cluster stitch on, tell them, that hat is made using a cluster stitch. Let them know that. Let them know that there's terms and that there's technical words for these things and that this is an art form, because it is. Be ready to talk about it. Be ready to be passionate about what you do. Sound like an expert, because you are an expert. If you're able to create product good enough to sell, you are an expert. And part of it is coming across that way. Not coming across as a know-it-all. There's a big difference between a know-it-all and an expert. But come across, let your customers know why you're charging more than Walmart. Because if you walked into Walmart and you asked one of their associates, for the most part, what kind of stitch is this? They would have no freaking clue. Now, it's all machine made for the most part, but they wouldn't even know that. So it's really important that you're able to tell your customers, oh yes, I used a cluster stitch when I made that hat. So you're identifying yourself as the maker. And a lot of this, there's a lot of psychology that goes into this. And I mean, I could do a whole course on this stuff, but that would be something that's really important. Be willing to talk to customers about the product. Color names. Use the color names of the yarn. Use the stitches. Use the stitch names. Use the pattern names. Be an expert. Be an expert. One of the things that I do is I keep a written record at the show of every sale I make and what it sold for. You may think that you're going to remember when you get home, and you're not. Keep a written record, and that way when you get home, you can really analyze what sold well and what didn't sell well. It's also great for the following year. If you're going to do the same market year after year, I do a market in Strathmore. Every fall and every Christmas, I do the Strathmore markets. I can look back at previous year's sales and sort of judge what I'm going to bring to that market based on those sales. So I can pre-plan based on those sales, and I can see what things sold at, because my pricing can also change from market to market depending on what market I'm going to. So a market out in a rural community, my prices might be 5% less than they are when I do a market here in town. First of all, the cost for the table is usually dramatically different, but also the clientele is different. You need to know your clientels in your different markets. You're not going to know that the first time you do a market. The first Strathmore market I did, I made $0. Well, that's not true. I actually sold a piece to my sister and a piece to my mom. Other than that, I made no money because I was overpriced for that market. But I didn't adjust my prices while I was there. I used it as a learning experience. The next market, I made, $250 on that market. And that was profit. So it's a learning experience. The first time you're going to get to know your different markets, and you're going to be able to price accordingly. Bags. Last thing I need to really talk to you about is bags. Please do not just save up your plastic grocery bags from the year and use that to put people's product into. It makes you look incredibly amateurish and makes it look incredibly flea market-ish. Now, if you're selling at a flea market, that's fine. But for the most part, craft fairs, homemade fairs, craft markets, these aren't flea markets. And you want to have invested a little bit into your packaging. I order paper bags online. I order them through Amazon. It works out to being usually about $1 a bag. Whew, that's pretty hefty for a package. And it is. But when I look at it, when I sell off of Etsy, my shipping costs are a lot more than $1 a bag. The bubble envelopes that I ship my project bags in when I sell them on Etsy cost between $3.99 and $4.99 each. So really, $1 for a paper bag is not huge. You'll find a lot of people at the market say, oh, no, I've brought my own bag, and that's fine. If you do paper bags, take the time to brand them at least a little bit. So each of my paper bags has a crow stamp on it, and I've written in black Sharpie, Rabe Creations. Just a little bit of branding so that when the person's carrying that bag around market, people are seeing that Rabe Creations. They're seeing my name, they're seeing my brand. Potentially somebody may ask that person about the bag, or they may walk past the booth and see those bags and make that connection to that's what that other person had, So it's important that you have invested a little bit into your packaging. Some people go really heavily into their packaging, but I would invest at least a little bit. Elevate it beyond the plastic shopping bags. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, they look tacky. And if you use plastic shopping bags, please don't be offended. I don't mean to offend. It's just, if we're talking about how to elevate and how to get top dollar from our product, not using plastic Safeway bags is probably a good way to go. So, in conclusion, because that's about all the information I'm going to give you today, if you would like further information about stuff like this, if you'd like me to do more detailed about specific things, let me know. I can do a little, break it down into more detailed segments about this stuff if there's interest out there. So go into each show knowing that you're going to learn something new. You may learn something new about your product. You may learn something new about your pricing. You may learn something new about your market. You may learn something new about other vendors. You're going to learn something new. That's a great thing. Take that knowledge and incorporate it into your next show. Make sure you're not just making connections with customers, but that you're making connections with your fellow vendors. They are a wealth of information. If they've been doing it for a really long time, they may have all kinds of insight that can help you out. It's also, especially if you don't have a booth buddy, so if you don't have somebody who's come with you to help you man your booth, it's really nice to be able to have somebody who will watch your booth for you when you have to go to the bathroom. So all of those little things. Get to know the people who are around you. Finally, what does a successful show look like to me? As long as I've made back the entry cost of my table. So if it cost me $50 to get my space, once I have to at least make $50. Once I've sold $50 worth of goods, in my mind, everything else is profit. So yeah, that's what makes it a profitable show for me. But there's also other things that sort of work into that profit margin. So things like how many contacts did you make with your business cards? How many contacts did you make with other vendors? How many potential pre-orders did you get? All of those things are also successes. So you have to look at the successes not just from a monetary standpoint. Yeah, so that's about all I've got for you today on my market experiences. If you want more information or if this was, valuable, let me know underneath. If you have information to share, let me know underneath. If you've got a difference of opinion, please let me know. Contact me through email if you'd like. All my contact information is below. I'd love to have this being an ongoing dialogue. Just a quick reminder that we do have our amigurumi make-along going on the Ravelry page. So come on over there and enter. There's some amazing amigurumis going on over there. That will run till the end of May, so you've still got some time to get some in there. Yeah, other than that, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you have a wonderful couple of weeks, and I'll see you soon. Bye now. So, day 2 of the market. I don't know if you can hear me. Take you on a brief tour of my booth. So the space this time was a little bit different in that it is narrow and deep. Sorry for that noise. So not a huge space, but I do believe in using every last inch. Hopefully I am not wiggling things around too much.